But if we started Magic from the beginning, we would just delete the upkeep step.
I'm about to sit down with one of the people who shaped Magic the Gathering's design over the last 15 years, and I flew to Las Vegas for MagicCon to make it happen. Gavin Verhey, principal designer at Wizards of the Coast, and a person responsible for so many of the cards that you and I have opened and played with over the last 15 years. I've had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask him for a very long time, and some of them I'm genuinely not sure if he's willing to answer. Expect Gavin's hottest takes on where Magic is heading, the design calls he still regrets years later, and how Gavin became the face of the Commander format after initially not liking the format at all. But without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Gavin Verhey. First kind of thing I really wanted to ask you about, because I actually resonate with this a lot. So when you first joined Wizards, you were a competitive 1v1 player. You had a bit of disdain towards the Commander format from what I've seen online. Obviously that changed when you led the Commander 2017 design, and so I'm very curious of what changed for you in that process, because now you're pretty much de facto the face of the Commander format.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild story, actually. So, you know, I wouldn't say I hated Commander or anything, but I was like, this is not for me. It is not my interest. I come from a competitive 1-1 background, playing on the Pro Tour. Like, that is very much my background. So I came to Wizards in 2011, so this is my 15th year there. And then I've been there maybe 4 years or so. And my manager came to me and he's like, hey, we have an opportunity for you to lead a Magic set. And I got so excited, right? Like, to me, that's the dream, right? You have to lead a Magic set, you can make all the calls, you do all this stuff. But it's a Commander set. And I was like, ugh, I mean, I don't really like this Commander thing. It's not really for me, you know? And my manager's like, just take a few days to think on it. Let me know on Monday. It was like Thursday or something. He's like, just think on it over the weekend and you can let me know on Monday. And it just so happened that weekend I was going to New York City. And so I flew to New York and I was wandering around and I walked into this little store that I'd been to maybe once or twice before called the Uncommons. It's a great place in New York City. It's like a board game cafe kind of vibe. It's crammed because it's New York, but they've got board games everywhere up and down the walls and, you know, great sized tables for Magic. And I was just walking through it and the new Commander decks had just come out. And I went into the back and there's this table of 4 people with a bunch of decks. And they were like, do you want to come play with us? We just bought all 5 precons and we have an extra one if you want to join. Oh, what the heck, why not? So I sat down, they handed me the Freyalia's precon. I had so much fun over the course of like the couple hours I was playing with them, and I was so drawn in by it that it caught me right away. I was like, maybe this Commander thing I thought wasn't for me, but the social nature of this, the way I could instantly connect with people, just laughing and having fun, and these people had no idea that I worked for Wizards. They're just like some random guy in a game store. And the fact that they opened up to me and were just like, hey, sit down and play with us, and we all had a fun time. I came back on Monday, I went to my manager, like, hey, I think I can do this Commander thing. Turns out that was a pretty important decision because it kind of got me to where I am today.
Do you think they offered it to you because they knew that you weren't the Commander guy, or was it just an availability thing?
It's not this way anymore, and I kind of pushed against this a little bit. It used to be for a long time that we gave Commander design jobs to people who were less experienced as like kind of a stepping stone product, because Commander was the small rinky-dink little thing in the corner and like, oh yeah. These days, we try and treat it a lot more like a real set. I push for that a lot because turns out these are decks being released in our most popular format. A lot of people are going to see them, they're going to care about the cards. Also, a lot of cards got made over time by more junior designers that were unhealthy for the format, so we want to give it the attention that it needs and deserves. Don't get me wrong, sometimes there are still people leading them as their first lead, but we make sure that there's a good scaffolding in place, other strong designers on that to help guide them and teach them as they go along, as opposed to what it was before, where it was often like a designer who was less experienced, surrounded by other less experienced designers, and you know, not everything that came out in that era I would do again. My first lead had Eminence as the lead mechanic, which we probably would not have done, certainly by today's standards.
Your favorite mechanic?
Yeah, they offered it to me just because it was available, but it ended up working out, and of course then I led Commander 2018 after that, and Battle Bond, and you know, the rest is history.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. I had a similar experience to you. I got into Magic because I liked 1v1. I started playing Sealed with a friend. He was like convinced me. He's like, dude, we gotta play Limited. Like, you can play Limited. It's like Hearthstone Arena. You gotta play this. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. Got instantly hooked on Limited.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I just can't get into Commander. You know, it doesn't really do it for me because it sort of feels so jank. You're playing with 4 people, it's free for all. But similarly, for me, is the social experience that got there. And I have other friends who are also competitive tryhards that play a lot of Limited. And when I speak to them about it, they're like, I don't get why you would like to play Commander. Like, why do you play this format? And I was like, guys, don't look at it as the same as 1v1. You're not trying to win that hard. You know, you want to win, but it's more the social experience. You know, you're more hanging out with people. I've converted, you know, a few of my friends really try hard 1v1 guys.
My friend Karen told me recently, she said this thing that will never leave my mind. It's that Magic is the golf of the games industry. I think about that all the time, right? It's like, we have some friends together, we're gonna go hang out or talk about business or talk about Magic or talk about, you know, our games that we're working on or just catch up on our lives. And ostensibly Magic is kind of happening, right? We're sitting down, we're playing, we're casting spells, there'll be a winner and a loser. But it's kind of more of a social thing than anything else. I'm like, Karen, I hate that analogy, and also you're so right about this.
So I'm curious if there's a card in sort of recent memory that hasn't made it into a set that you thought was really, really good. And the reason I ask this is because I know you've had a bit of fun with mystery boosters in particular. So Experiment 5, I believe was what it's called, the bear snake, which was, you know, your sort of contribution to the art world in Magic.
And Problematic Volcano, I illustrated 2 cards in that set.
That was when you fell into the volcano, and that was the card.
Yeah, very personally based there.
The other one that Richard Garfield did, I think, was Zyru Spectre,
Yeah.
that you managed to sort of fit into Mystery Booster as sort of a bit of a homage to sort of his presence. I'm really curious if there's any cards in sort of any sets recently that you thought were really, really good that just didn't make the cut for whatever reason.
Yes. You know, one of the things about any given Magic set is we will make thousands of cards for any given Magic set, and sometimes they don't make it for whatever reason, right? Sometimes we put a card in and it doesn't survive, and maybe it just doesn't fit the theme correctly, or it's a little too imbalanced in standard, or any number of things could kick it out of a set. I always like to save those in my back pocket for later. The ones that we try and it's like, oh, we're never gonna make this, those will end up in a mystery booster or unknown event or something crazy like that sometimes, or just be lost to the sands of time. But the good ones we do keep around and try and put in other places. For example, there's a card in Star Trek that's coming out later this year that I really liked, and partway during development, it was kind of decided it wasn't going to be able to fit that set. We actually pulled it and used it in a set later on down the road. So I can't say what the cards do, of course, but like we do that all the time as well, where, because, you know, Magic players see sets are released in a linear order, right? They're not time travelers. It's like bam, 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 the sets come out. I, however, am a time traveler. When I go to work, I will work on sets for 4 different years, all in the span of a day. And I'm constantly hopping between different sets. And so it's about the right cards finding the right homes. And so sometimes you'll play a card in a set and be like, ooh, actually, that would go really well over here, right? And then you talk with the leads and they negotiate something and you move it around. One thing I've been trying to do a lot more recently is making sure that between the commander products that are tied to the sets and the main sets, the right cards end up in the right places. And so we've been doing more cross collaboration between the set lead and the commander lead. And so there've been a few times recently where cards have gotten pulled from the commander decks into the main set, and a couple other times where cards have gotten pulled from the main set into the commander decks. And so we also shuffled some cards around that way. So the cards are moving around all the time, but if you have a good idea, it'll get put back somewhere.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that's really, really cool. I feel like that context switch has to be so difficult, just going through that many sets. I mean, are you just used to it, or is that something that's just sort of...
It's a thing that I often forget that I am used to, because we'll bring new people in and they're like, what set was that in? And I'm like, oh, well, it was this, of course, right? And I think I've just done it for so long that I have a good idea of how to do that all now. But it is very jarring, and don't get me wrong, the show lots of times we're like, oh, I saw a card recently. What set was that in? And maybe it was a card that even got removed from a set, like, and you played it 2 months ago. Like, who knows? Sometimes the answer is, Gavin, that card's already out.
I feel like that's it's a lot. I do have a follow-on question from that, because Final Fantasy very famously took, I think, 4 or 5 years in development. For me, you know, as someone who's relatively new to the game, and I thought that was one of the best limited sets in recent years. So we've gone back and played a lot from the last 3-4 years, and I really have to say Final Fantasy stands out to me as just being so balanced. All the color archetypes make sense. They all sort of work. Is that a function, do you think, of the time spent in development, or is that something that, you know, was just truly a labor of love and sort of, you know, maybe lightning just happened to strike on that particular set?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a few different things. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity, right? And so when it comes to a set, ultimately, there's a lot of things that you do to try and get it right. And our team at Design Unlimited is probably better than it's ever been. If you look at most sets that have come out in the past couple of years, the majority of them, I think, have been really strong limited sets. Even the sets people kind of malign or like don't love for Constructed, they're pretty fun to draft still, right? Especially if you go back and compare them to things 10 or even 5 years ago sometimes. You're like, we are in a really good age for limited sets right now. In particular, one is that I think the mechanics were really well built for limited. Sometimes you get down the path a little bit and you get into the nitty gritty of the limited design. You kind of discover that like some of these can't support archetypes as well as you would like. For example, you look at a mechanic like Kicker and Zendikar Rising. We tried to make a blue-green Kicker archetype, and it's like, it's just really hard to make that kind of work as an archetype. Where a lot of the mechanics in Final Fantasy stuff like equipment, well, job select already bridged that gap really nicely, right? It actually solves the problem that equipment often has in limited, which is you can't split your creatures and equipment well enough. Well, that fixes the problem for you. I think sagas were also a really great mechanic because they create this great back and forth flow in gameplay. One of the things that makes limited games feel fun is when both players are winning at some point, right? It's not just someone getting snowballed. And saga creatures are great because you play them and you feel really ahead, but then your creature dies and suddenly like maybe you're on the back foot. They create this great kind of feel of the game. One thing I did that I'm really, really, really glad I did in retrospect with Final Fantasy is there was a lot of people during the process that asked, should saga creatures or enchantments be a 2-color archetype somewhere? And you see some tiny like remnants and hints of that in green-white uncommon, like there's the Garnet, for example, that takes counters off your sagas. But I really wanted to not do that because I didn't want to group those cards that can kind of snowball all in one place. And I'm really glad I did in retrospect, because I think that would have actually hurt the format a bit of having one archetype that was so focused on saga creatures that it kind of stole them from the other players and became a very kind of have or I don't deck itself. So I just didn't think the mechanics were well set up for that. And the final thing I think that really helped out is a lot of the uncommons in the set are very like sideways build around unique effects. And that means that on your 10th draft, you're still finding unique things to do. The rares have that element as well. The bonus sheet has that as well. I'll never forget, it was like one of the last drafts we did of the format internally, and Arya, one of my coworkers, drafted this Yawgmoth Finn Death Touch Poison deck. And it was sick. And I'd never seen that before in the draft format, right? And the bonus sheet lets you do that so much. So, but at the end of the day, right, we're just making the best judgment calls we can, and then we flip all of our coins, and they're weighted coins, but we hope they come up heads, and you know, I think they almost all came up heads with Final Fantasy. So I feel very fortunate with how that all turned out.
Yeah, no, Legendary set, we still draft it very regularly, I would say. Of all the sort of sets that are out of the limited rotation, I think that's the one that we go back to the most. And when new players come to the store that I go to, it's always something that when we say, hey, let's do a Final Fantasy draft, we'll have 2 pods full, just like that, you know, and it's great. I'll go back and I'm like, I remember this, and then you're staring down a fat chocobo and you're like, ah.
2 other hallmarks of good limited formats to me. One is good mana fixing is nice. I feel like the mana fixing in the set is good enough that you can splash other colors. You can play the 5-color town deck or whatever, or 4 colors, whatever you want to do. And 2 is every archetype, as you mentioned, kind of works, right? Usually there's 1 or 2 that are little duds. We were the most nervous about blue-red because it's kind of a weird archetype, right? The caring about 4 mana spent.
Ended up the best.
And then ended up getting there, which was really good. So very proud of how this all turned out.
Okay, we reached the fun part. So, you know how I like to ask people for their hot takes. So I'm curious, Gavin Verhey, what is your Magic the Gathering hot take?
I got so many hot takes. I don't know how many, if I'm allowed to give you more than one or whatever.
Please.
I'll start with one. This is from Magic Design hot take. If we were starting Magic from the beginning, we won't do it now because like printing too many cards with it or whatever. Starting Magic from the beginning, we would just delete the upkeep step. There's no reason for it to exist. I hate the upkeep. I wish it was not in Magic the Gathering.
Interesting.
It's like, hey, what does this step do? Nothing. Every time you teach everyone, you're like, untap, upkeep, draw. Untap my cards. What happens in upkeep? 0. Nothing happens in upkeep. Most of the time, triggers that happen in the upkeep could either happen at the beginning of your first main phase, which is when we often do them now, because upkeep is so annoying to have to be like, remember before you draw, how often do you like draw, and then you're like, ah crap, I got an upkeep trigger, but I have this information. It's just annoying. Or in your draw step, right? I would just get rid of the upkeep, and I would eat the fact that sometimes an ability will trigger that could happen before you draw, because most abilities these days happen in the first main phase. I get there's some design space there, I get there's Paradox, Haze, Lovers, but I would just delete the upkeep. If I was making Magic again, there's a lot of things I would change, but that's maybe a controversial one.
No, that's fair. I'm curious. So, because a lot of times, you know, you kind of untap all your lands and then you might play something before you draw to manipulate your deck or something. So where would that go if we lost the upkeep?
Yeah, just you draw your card. That's it. You're in your turn. You draw your card. The first thing you do is you untap your cards, you draw your card. Now your turn has begun. No opponent is like, you know, casting misbind click in your upkeep. You got to do it now. I think that's how I would have done it if I was making it now.
Silence and Izzet players around the world are.
Yeah, I mean, Magic's a different game. I'm not saying it's not a different game. I just think like having this step is annoying, you know.
Cool.
And would you lose things? Yes, but I think the games would be worth it for what you lose.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So you said you had more.
Oh, yeah. So I'll call that a design hot take. Oh, I have so many good design hot takes, but I'll share a non-design hot take. I was actually thinking about making a video about this, and I haven't done it yet, but I'll give you the first little ditty on it maybe.
It's an honor.
So right now, Magic is great and amazing and growing, but it's become like a little segmented, I'd say, or stratified, where you have like this large group of competitive players and this large group of commander players, and they're kind of playing 2 very different games. Players who are jamming 1-on-1 limited and standard constructed, and the players who are playing commander will look at a card and see almost 2 entirely different things. There are cards that are bananas in 1-on-1 that are unplayable in Commander. You don't see a Corey Steelcutter getting played on a Commander table, but it's like strong enough to be like banned in formats, right? And vice versa in Commander. There are cards that are outrageous in Commander, but you would never play in 1-on-1. Teferi's Protection is a card that I don't think you would ever play in a 1-on-1 deck. People love playing Commander, right?
Yeah. Even Ristic Study.
Ristic Study is a great example. It was a nothing prophecy common for so long. In Commander, people call for it to be banned, right? It's a great example. I think Magic would be a way better game if every player who's a competitive player tried building some Commander decks, going to Command Fest, sitting down and playing, and if every Commander player picked like one standard competitive season and spent time practicing, building a deck, and playing in the tournament. Afterwards, if that's not what you want to do, that's totally fine. You can move on with your life. But I think just understanding the language that both sides are speaking would really help unify those two groups and let them at least talk to each other, right? Because right now, if you look at a lot of like online discourse, it's often a lot of people being like, this card sucks or whatever, and it's like, well, actually, no, that card doesn't suck. It's just like not for you. It's like a totally different player that loves this. I think it would really open folks' eyes to another kind of play. I've also seen a lot of times like people realize that they actually enjoy the other thing. I'll use Limited as a great example. I've talked to mini Commander players recently that have played in, say, their first pre-release or done their first like draft, and they're like, actually, this is awesome. I'm having so much fun doing this. And it's like, yeah, it's been there the whole time. I've been trying to tell you, draft rules. Like, come check this out. Or someone being like, man, I wish I could be more competitive. And I was like, dude, you just got to try Standard. And one of my good friends who's played Commander for years finally started just playing competitive Standard recently because they're like, oh, this is actually what I wanted to do. And they still play Commander. They still love Commander. But they're like, finally, here's the competitive outlet I actually wanted all that time is right here. And so, once again, all these ways of playing Magic are great and valid and wonderful. I just would love if everyone tried all of them before making their final decision.
I'll double down on that. I 100% agree. I think a lot of people at the store that I see, who are newer to Magic or who've been playing for actually quite some time, they're Commander-only players. So one thing that I always say to people, because they're always asking, hey, how do I get better at the game? How do I improve? And I'm like, go play some draft. Because you're learning card evaluation, you're learning deck building. You have to assess, a lot of things that are more on the competitive side that also require you to put together limited resources to sort of make it work. And I think that's something that most people at the Commander table, if they're just casually playing Commander, they really miss that experience and they'll end up net decking and sort of spending hours putting it together, and a lot of times like, I don't really enjoy it. But I feel like you get that vision almost when you're reading a deck list after you do enough limited one-on-one. You're starting to feel like, okay, I kind of see how this plays. I kind of get more of a vibe for how these cards work together. And like, yeah, I know that I'll like this or I won't. You know what I mean?
100% agree with you. Whenever someone says, how do I get better? I always tell them play limited. In Commander, the weight of every single decision is substantially less, right? You can like make a bunch of small, like wrong plays, and it kind of doesn't matter a lot of the time because there's 3 other players who will do stuff before it gets back to your turn. In Limited, all that stuff matters so much. It compounds over time. If you want to get better, please play Limited. It will make you so much better. I cannot recommend it enough.
100% agree. That's great. I got a lot of friends at home who I'm gonna show this to, and they'll love to hear that. I'll ask you both sides of this, but what do you think is the most overrated Magic the Gathering Commander?
Most overrated Magic the Gathering Commander. That's a really good question. I would actually give most overrated these days to the original Commander 2016 Atraxa. That was a card that was the menace at tables, right? For a long time, it's like, man, the Atraxa player, like it's cracked, they're gonna beat a bunch of counters in play, they're gonna proliferate a ton. And don't get me wrong, it's a strong card, and you can still like build very strong decks with it. But honestly, with the pace of play a lot of Commander decks have these days and the power of Commanders, it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. And it used to be like you must kill it on sight, and these days, Atraxa can stay in play for a few turns and it's not the end of the world. It's still strong, but part of being overrated is not that your card sucks or whatever. It's that like it's just a lot weaker than it used to be.
You say this to me as I've just purchased a serialized Atraxa, the Praetor's Voice. But no,
it's still good. It's still good. Okay.
No, but I actually agree. I had one of my first decks that I wanted to build was actually Atraxa, and I built it. I did a Super Friends deck, and I was like, the end step proliferate trigger doesn't actually do that much because there's so many cards now that just say proliferate, and you can pay an X cost and proliferate X number of times, and it's just way more impactful in a way, right? So I totally get that, but that's an interesting one.
Like you would not put in your deck 4 colors, 4/4, end of your turn, proliferate, right? So like you need to be able to get multiple turns of value turn over turn to make it strong, and it's cost 6 mana if it's killed to recast. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but like it's just not what it used to be. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
I also think a lot of folks play more pinpoint removal these days than they used to, which also means that you're not even necessarily guaranteed the end step trigger, right?
On the same vein, what do you think is the most underrated Magic the Gathering Commander?
That is tough. I mean, there's so many commanders out there that people play with all the time. It's hard to like pinpoint one underrated commander. A commander that every time I see someone play it, I'm like, wow, this is outrageous, is Henzi Toolbox Tori from Streets of New Capenna. I don't know if any of you have ever played with this card, but like every time I see that deck played, it is like outrageously strong. And don't get me wrong, it's popularly built. There's plenty of Henzi decks out there, but I don't think that it gets the like pedigree that it deserves as among the strongest commanders. But I think it is a really strong commander. Okay,
that's an interesting one. I'll look into that. Yeah.
Honestly, my real answer for underrated commander is just like any partner. Partner is like a cracked mechanic. It's you start with an extra card. The original C16 partners are crazy to me. They're absolutely crazy. Here's the deal: you get to start with 1 more card in your opening hand. But the downside is you get to play with more colors in your deck. And it's like, what? how that should work at all. The play more colors is just stronger, and you get 2 cards. It drives me insane. That's why with Commander Legends, it was like monocolor only.
Yeah.
2 color, you're locked in. All right, fine. The same thing for the backgrounds, right? The backgrounds in Baldur's Gate is like you have to be locked into 2 color because at least that's a cost of some kind you're paying.
Yeah.
Right, being a 2 color deck.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh, that's too funny.
4 colors and 2 cards, man. Just get out of town. Thrasios, jump off a bridge, please. But you can swim, it's not even going to help. Anyway.
On that topic, actually, I guess, you've been public about a lot of design choices that you think didn't really shake out that well. You mentioned Rogue Rack, which I think is a great one. It's an interesting one, because every time I look at building a deck with Rogue Rack as a partner, I'm always like, you can do some really busted stuff here with just, sacking or just playing for tempo. I mean, it's crazy. What's something that you think you haven't talked about that much that you think is something that is regrettable in hindsight?
When you're making Magic cards, we always want to be pushing the envelope, and sometimes you place bets on things that you try and they don't work out, right? I'll give you a good example is, we do this some with pre-con themes. We tried this like blue-green voting deck with the Lord of the Rings, and I think that was just a bad bet to make, right? Like, should have just done an elf deck. People like elves. Elf matters would have been easy to execute on. Instead, we tried this voting thing that like was not really that popular in retrospect.
Sure.
So like that's one example, but I could probably give a number of examples of different pre-cons. I feel like it didn't end up working out. I'm still glad we tried it. It was worth the experiment, right? But you take that and you learn. I remember one of the great pre-cons of all time that I'm so glad we killed was I was working on Commander Masters. And one of the precons for a long time was, it was called the Evil Zedru. It was like give your opponent stuff that was like then like hurt them in some way, right?
Zedru's Great-Hearted, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like Evil Zedru.
Evil Zedru,
So
okay.
you give them like steel golems so they can't cast creature spells,
Okay, yep,
and like
yep.
cards that say when they die they lose the game and whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yep.
And it was like kind of fun to play with and very novel, but like really unfun to play against. And eventually I just had to like throw it out. It was too not enjoyable. On the individual card level, I don't know. There's some cards that we made like a little too strong. Like Trouble in Pairs is a good example of something that we probably made a little too strong. I feel like in the past year or two, I'm pretty happy with a lot of the individual designs we've been making.
I'm actually building a Zedru deck where you give people nasty stuff. And one of my friends, buddy who's been playing for a very long time, he was like, yeah, this is like a kill on sight commander if you're doing that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean the Evil Zedru deck was black color identity, so we would give them like immortal coils and like all kinds of Kulfner's plans and all kinds of bad stuff. So
nice. Okay, that's awesome. To close things off, you have arguably the coolest job in the world, and I'm curious, what do you think is the best part about it?
Honestly, the best part of my job is getting to go to work every day with people that love this game and are my friends, right? Like I get excited to go to work, and I've been doing this for 15 years. That's crazy. I don't know like anyone else outside of the building I work in that is like, yeah, I've done this for 15 years and I get excited to go to work on Monday morning, right? It's always different. It's always fun. Sure, not every moment of every day is always like the most perfect moment of all time. It's still a job, right? There's still like work that has to get done. There's still like some, grueling stuff that happens occasionally, but I overall really love it, and it's the people that really make it for me. Whether it's the internal folks or just the folks out in the world too, right? Like I'm gonna go to MagicCon this weekend, and the smiles and the questions and stories and stuff from this weekend is gonna energize me so much, so I'm gonna love it.
That's cool. Yeah, you make something that enriches people's lives, I think, a lot, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's very special to me to get to do that. Not many people get to do something that like actively impacts people's lives in a way like this, and I really appreciate I get to. So
awesome. Yeah, hell yeah. Gavin Verhey, that's it.
Thanks so much, Blade. Appreciate the chat today. This is great.